Discover the incredible moment when my daughter-in-law exposed hidden truths at the party. John stood in his garage, the scent of motor oil lingering in the air as he tightened the last bolt on an old Chevy. Tonight was the night, a family gathering that should have been a source of joy, but instead felt like a pressure cooker about to blow. For years, John had taken pride in being the dependable mechanic, the backbone of his family. Now, as he envisioned his loved ones filling the house, laughter intertwining with the rich aroma of his homemade chili, his heart raced with an anxiety that he couldn't shake. Emily, his ambitious daughter-in-law, was set to challenge the unspoken rules of their family ties, and he could feel the weight of impending confrontation looming like a storm cloud. His mind flooded with memories. Ted, his childhood friend, had been more than just a companion. He had been a figure respected by all. Yet whispers of Ted's questionable business ethics gnawed at the edges of John's loyalty. Could it really be that the man who'd known his family for years was tangled in betrayal? Every fiber of his being wanted to dismiss those rumors, but as he wiped his hands on a rag, inner turmoil clawed at him. Was he truly seeing the signs? Or was he merely blinded by the nostalgia of their shared past? As guests began to arrive, John's hands shook slightly, a shaky facade he wouldn't let anyone see. The sound of laughter echoed through their cozy home, mingling with the bubbling chili on the stove. But beneath the cheer was a festering anxiety that coiled tight in his gut. Emily had been growing bolder this past year, driven by a need for integrity and truth that felt foreign to John's old-fashioned sensibilities. It was almost as if she viewed him as a relic, stuck in a simpler time. Before they sat down for dinner, an undeniable tension simmered. "Can we address the elephant in the room?" Emily's voice carried a weight that silenced the crowd. John's heart sank, apprehension clawing at him. She was going to bring up Ted. The game of charades they'd planned faded into the background as she exchanged knowing glances with John, her resolve unwavering. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications, so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." But the moment had passed. Emily's eyes were sharp as she turned toward Ted, that self-satisfied smirk he always wore twisting into something defensive. John's mind raced, memories pouring in. Summer days spent fishing, laughter shared over old stories. Yet, with every second, the chasm between loyalty to a friend and the looming possibility of betrayal deepened. What if Emily was right? The thought sent jagged shards of panic through him. As accusations began to unravel, dread filled the room like heavy smoke. John felt paralyzed, muscles tight as uncertainty washed over him. Could he defend the man he grew up cherishing, even in the face of betrayal lurking around the corner? The implications spun in his mind, tension intermingling with desperation. His family's future hanging precariously in the balance. The clock ticked on, and as conversations turned to heated disagreements, John was caught in a cyclone of emotions. Pride, fear, loyalty, and he couldn't see a way out. The truth that Emily had begun to reveal would alter the very fabric of their lives. He could feel it in the marrow of his bones. In the thickening air, the weight of unresolved questions lingered, and as the confrontation escalated, John's heart sank deeper into uncertainty. What would he choose? Defend Ted, or face the chaos of family truth? The night spiraled, and the storm was just beginning. The confrontation reached a fever pitch, voices raised and tears brimming in Emily's eyes as she leveled her accusations at Ted. John stood frozen in the eye of the storm, each word cutting deeper, exposing his own insecurities and doubts. He had always prided himself on being the refuge to his family, a person of strength. But now he felt vulnerable, unmoored. The laughter that had filled the room moments before morphed into a cacophony of outrage and disbelief. "John, you have to stand with us," Emily implored, her gaze fixed on him, pleading for his support. It was clear she saw him not just as a father-in-law, but as a potential ally in the battle for honesty and integrity. But the chasm in his heart widened. Here was his daughter-in-law, wielding truth like a sword, while Ted's familiar past loomed as the comfortable lie he'd held onto for years. John's mind surged with conflicting emotions. Could he really confront Ted, the man who had held his childhood in his hands, the man who had known every joy and sorrow of his youth? If he sided with Emily, would that mean erasing the bonds of memory that tied him to Ted? The pain of that choice felt like a slow burn. Intense, yet impossibly distant. A surge of anger washed over him as he realized that he had never given himself permission to question the man he had trusted blindly. Yet the storm inside him stirred. Should he choose the easy path of denial, or step onto the rocky terrain of uncomfortable truths? A sudden voice cut through the tension, shaking him from his daze. "John, are you just going to let her continue without saying anything?" His son Tom, standing stunned amid the chaos, turned to him. "We need to know where you stand." The question hung in the air, heavy with expectation. John glanced at Ted. The man's expression twisted between defiance and guilt, and yet he felt a twinge of sympathy for the man's distress. In that moment, something shifted within him. John grasped the cold reality that he would either stand for the truth or perpetuate a lie. For too long, he had allowed loyalty to trap him in a web of complicity. "Enough!" he finally shouted, surprising even himself with the authority in his voice. Silence fell, the cacophony replaced by heavy breaths and wide eyes. "I won't pretend there isn't something wrong anymore. If it's true that Ted has betrayed us, if he really has been involved in something dishonest, then we need to face it, together." A wave of shock, mixed with relief, washed over Emily's face. In that moment, John felt an unexpected surge of strength. He was thrust into a position of accountability, not just for his family, but for himself. He needed to own his role in this evolving narrative. As the evening wore on, the tension shifted in subtle, potent ways. John realized he held the pen that could rewrite their familial story, a chance to confront fears and past mistakes. He began to strategize how to approach the situation, focusing on healing rather than dissecting, determining to facilitate open conversations moving forward. The conversation shifted from accusations to discussions of what truth could actually mean for them all. He secured a commitment from Emily and Tom to explore the situation rationally before jumping to conclusions. That was his focus now, rebuilding trust through communication and transparency, using this tumult as an impetus for growth. Yet, in the quiet recesses of his mind, doubt still lingered. What if everything he had done over the years crumbled at the slightest provocation? Could he truly reshape his identity amidst truths he had long avoided? As the night continued, John caught himself staring at an old photograph of Ted and him, taken during happier times. Memories danced in distant shadows. But beneath the nostalgia, he felt the scars of unresolved betrayal. Standing on the precipice of change, he wondered if he could step forward into a new kind of honesty that demanded courage and vulnerability. What would that reveal about who he truly was? Just as he thought he had found clarity, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Ted was leaving the room, his expression unreadable. Without a second thought, John decided he couldn't let this moment slip away. Gripping the edge of the table, he called out, "Ted, wait!" The air went still, and all eyes turned toward the door. What would come next would define them all. "John, don't!" Ted's shaky voice cut through the silence as he paused mid-stride. The tension in the room thickened, becoming almost palpable. John could feel the collective breath of his family held in anticipation, each member silently urging him forward or backward in this critical moment. "Why shouldn't I?" John countered, feeling a rush of resolve against the tide of uncertainty that threatened to pull him back. "You can't just walk away when everything we've built is on the line. I deserve answers, and so does Emily." Ted's body relaxed slightly, a flicker of remorse crossing his face. "It's not that simple, John," he replied, a note of desperation threading through his words. "Why bring all this up now? Are we really willing to destroy everything?" The question hung heavy in the air, weighing on John's mind. Destroy? Part of him wanted to scream at Ted, to point out how blind loyalty had led him down a path of denial. But a more profound realization began to settle within him. This wasn't just about the possibility of destruction. It was about the chance for rebuilding something authentic. "I can't support your silence any longer," he said, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. "If we want to heal, we need to confront the truth. We can't pretend this isn't happening." Emily moved to stand beside him, her shoulder brushing against his. The bond forged in that moment ignited something within him. A shared purpose. An understanding that this wasn't merely about Ted anymore. It was about their collective resilience and the future they hoped to rebuild. "What if I admit to what I've done?" Ted's voice trembled as he faced them. "What good would that serve? I could lose everything." "And what if you don't?" John interrupted, a wave of urgency compelling him forward. "What if facing the truth gives us a chance to start anew? You taught me how vital it is to confront the darkness. Why stop now?" Ted flinched, as if John's words struck a chord deep within him. For the first time, John caught a glimpse of the fear that had governed Ted's choices. Fear of losing not only relationships, but also a sense of self that seemed irrevocably tied to the past. The stillness shattered as Ted turned back to face John fully. "I've made mistakes," he admitted quietly, tears glistening in his eyes. The vulnerability in his voice transformed the charged atmosphere, shifting the balance of power. "I've hidden truth to protect myself, but it hasn't worked." In that revelation, John felt an unexpected shift within himself. He had always seen Ted as an unmovable pillar of strength. Now, the crack in that facade offered a glimpse of potential redemption. Perhaps there was a way not only to confront Ted, but to also understand the frail humanity within them both. But as he considered Ted's admission, a fear gnawed at his resolve. What other secrets lingered beneath the surface? Had their lives been stitched together with mere facades, fabrications that would unravel if picked at too aggressively? The conversation hung in a fragile balance, a tightrope stretched between confronting painful truths and the yearning for peace. What would it take to move forward? Would this moment of honesty be the foundation for rebirth, or the catalyst for irrevocable fracture? "John, this isn't just about me. It's about all of us. You know there's more to the story," Ted said, his voice laced with a sense of urgency that sparked an unsettling curiosity within John. What else had gone unsaid? The realization hit him with sudden clarity. He had to discover the deeper motives that had driven Ted's actions. "More?" he pressed. "What else is there?" Everyone in the room leaned closer, anticipation crackling in the air. Ted was cornered now. There was no escaping the conversation or the implications. As Ted hesitated, John felt the ground shifting beneath him, anchored now in a new resolve. The moment unfurled before him, raw and unfiltered, and he understood the depth of this confrontation would demand more from him than he had initially thought. "Speak," John urged. "Tell us everything. We can't move forward until we truly know the extent of what you've done." The air around them shimmered with unspoken truths, laden with the weight of their history. Ted's moment hung in the balance, teetering on the brink of revelation that could alter their family's trajectory forever. "Okay," Ted finally whispered, the surrender palpable. "It's time you knew everything." A knot formed in John's stomach as he braced for what would come next. As Ted's voice trembled with the weight of impending confessions, John could feel a whirlwind of emotions crashing against his composure. This was the moment they had all dreaded, yet somehow longed for. The answers could either begin the process of mending, or lead to irrevocable chaos. Lost in thought, John could hardly breathe, his heart pounding against the confines of his chest, like a drum summoning the troops for battle. "Before I say anything," Ted started, a deep breath catching in his throat. "You need to understand that I did it all for your sake. I thought I was protecting you. But I've realized that you can't protect someone from the truth forever." John noted how Ted's admission shifted the air, reassigning the dynamics within the room. There he stood, a flawed man untangling the threads of their shared past, revealing not only the actions that brought this moment, but the motivations behind them. "Protecting us?" John thought incredulously. "What kind of protection is built on dishonesty?" He sensed an unexpected flicker of anger igniting within him. "You mean keeping us in the dark? Treating us like children who can't handle reality?" Ted's expression twisted with regret. "I thought if I kept you from the harshest realities, you would remain safe, remain innocent." But innocence had never felt like a goal to John. It had felt more like a prison. A painful constriction around his experience and growth. Lessons to be learned, challenges to be faced. He needed to confront Ted's actions, not merely for himself, but for Emily too. "Your idea of protection is suffocating," John said, feeling a surge of clarity and purpose. "We'll never grow if we aren't faced with the truth. Where does it end? What else have you hidden? This isn't just about your decisions. It's about the choices we are being deprived of. The autonomy to make our own path." Silence fell heavily, and John watched as Ted absorbed his words, his shoulders slumping under the weight of realization. This wasn't just about John demanding answers. It was a turning point, a defining moment in John's journey. He could feel the layers of confusion peeling away, revealing a version of himself that seemed more empowered. Ted's voice finally broke through the silence once more. "I didn't just hide things about my past. I hid things about your mother's illness, about the debt we've accrued, about the family secrets that could tear us apart." With these revelations, John felt the floor beneath him shifting once again. The ground he once stood firmly on now unstable. "What secrets?" he probed, a pulse of dread echoing in his veins. Ted swallowed hard, the admission evidently painful. "It's everything. The lies I spun to protect our image, the deals I made that put us at risk. But I thought it was all for the right reasons. I thought I was doing right by everyone." A whirlwind of emotions swelled within John. As each word settled in, he grappled with feelings of betrayal intertwined with pity. He realized that beneath Ted's facade of strength lay a man burdened by guilt and fear. Perhaps Ted was as lost as John had ever felt. Yet this was a pivotal point. John had to make a choice about how to navigate the incoming storm. What path would he take now? How would he ensure that their honesty served as the catalyst for growth rather than anguish? Doubt raced back in, but he quelled it with purpose. John knew now that facing the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, could pave a way towards a more authentic existence. "This may feel like an ending," he said, "but it's really just the beginning. We have to face what's been said and what will come." John felt his heart stutter and surge, both excited and terrified by the unknown possibilities lying ahead. This was his chance to carve out a new legacy, not just for himself, but for Emily and the family as a whole. Just as he inhaled to speak again, Ted looked up, his eyes reflecting a blend of fear and hope. "There's more I need to tell you. Things I haven't even scratched the surface of." "Then tell us," John urged, the emerging sense of power within him intertwining with the anxiety of what was still to come. "Let's confront all of it together." A tense silence resumed as Ted prepared to unveil the deeper truths. With the stakes raised and the path set for revelations, John braced himself for the journey that awaited. This moment was not just about uncovering the past. It was about forging a new future, even if it was shrouded in uncertainty. As Ted sat back, visibly steeling himself, the weight of so many unspoken truths hung in the air. John felt an unsettling anticipation build within him, amplifying his inner resolve. He had arrived at a critical juncture, no longer merely a spectator to the failures of his family, but a participant ready to reclaim his autonomy and grow. "We need to confront this head-on," Ted finally said, his voice quavering. "It's about your mother, her medical expenses. The debt spiraled out of control because I didn't want you to be burdened. I believed I could manage it all, but I failed." John shifted uncomfortably. Managing failure was something he had wrestled with, and he could see the parallels. Ted might have tried to shield him, but in reality, he had stifled any chance of addressing their problems together. "Why didn't you involve me?" he asked, the words slipping through his tightly clenched teeth. Ted's gaze fell. "I didn't think you were ready. That I could handle it. Alone." In a flicker of realization, John understood the origins of his own hesitance in life. He had inherited Ted's fear of vulnerability. It was true that he often avoided confronting his insecurities, loading himself with unrealistic expectations that crumbled under pressure. But he needed to break free from that cycle. "I get it now," John murmured. "I don't want to continue this pattern. I want to share the burden whether it hurts or not." The tension transformed into a strange solidarity between them. They were two men caught in a tangle of deception, both novices at navigating the fallout. John was surprised at how understanding his sense of loss felt, how it adapted to include Ted's pain. "So what do we do?" he asked, finding strength in action. Ted leaned forward, eyes alight with a flicker of hope dispelling the shadows. "We have to come clean to Emily, to tell her everything. She deserves to know the truth, no matter how painful." With this declaration, John realized that this wasn't merely an act of disclosure. It was a step towards empowerment. The thought of sitting down with Emily filled him with equal parts dread and determination. How would she react to the truths hidden from her? Truth that could reshape her perception of both her father and her past? "Let's do it, then," John declared, his words imbued with a newfound assertiveness. It was no longer about trying to balance the delicate fabric of their family. It was about weaving a stronger thread. He resolved to confront the issues head-on, battling the fear that had previously shrouded him. As they spoke in low tones about the logistics of that discussion, a plan naturally began to surface. John wanted to instill a sense of agency in Emily. It would not be enough to merely share truths. It had to be about giving her a voice in the impending storm of family discord. "First, we will tell her all of it, including the financial issues. Then we'll offer her the chance to help us rebuild," John said, shifting into a strategic mindset. "It's time we trust the next generation to handle complexity." The evening wore on, but John could no longer ignore the doubts creeping back in. Would she understand? Would she resent Ted's decisions? As the uncertainties rattled inside him, John took a deep breath, pushing them aside. Each hesitation was a familiar shadow, a reflection of his past habits of retreating. He looked at Ted, a flicker of resolve tracing their glances. "But what if she doesn't want to hear it?" Ted exclaimed, his worry surfacing. "Then we will face that together too," John replied, steely conviction filling his voice. Truth demands courage, and we owe it to ourselves to embrace every part of our reality. As the weight of their conversation hung thick in the air, John recognized this moment as pivotal. A launchpad for a journey far beyond what he'd imagined. He closed his eyes and visualized the confrontation with Emily, painted vividly in his mind. Each part of the dialogue sharpening his focus towards resolution. A fresh breath of determination flowed through him, propelling him toward what lay ahead. But just as he began to formulate strategies, a possibility gnawed at him. The fear that confronting these truths could either obliterate their family dynamic or become the catalyst for healing. What if the aftermath was more than he could bear? Just then, the door creaked open, and Emily's voice rang out from the hallway. "Dad, are you two in there? I need to talk to you both." John felt his heart race. This was the moment they'd been preparing for. The moment that could either fracture everything or start rebuilding. Taking one last deep breath, he prepared to push through the door. Uncertainty and resolve intertwined, ready to uncover everything that lay ahead. As the door swung open, Emily stood on the threshold. Her expression mirrored the tempest of emotions swirling within John. Curiosity mixed with a hint of trepidation. Instead of entering, she leaned against the frame, her arms crossed, waiting for a prompt that would guide her into this charged atmosphere. John felt the urgency of the conversation pressing down on him. But alongside it, stirred an instinct to shield his daughter from realizations that could be as painful as they were complex. "Hey, Em, come in," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. Emily stepped into the room, her gaze bouncing back and forth between Ted and John. "What's going on? You both look serious." There was an underlying concern in her tone, threading through John's resolve. He knew he couldn't delay any longer. The air in the room thickened, and he could practically hear their collective heartbeat, urging him forward. "Emily, there's something we need to discuss," he began, his sincerity cracking through the facade he'd maintained for so long. "It's about your mom, and us." She straightened, questions brimming in her eyes, echoing suspicions he hoped lay dormant. "What about Mom?" Her gentle prodding ignited the commitment within John, but mixed with it was the weight of impending truths. He could stand there risking Emily's trust, or plunge into the depths of their shared reality. There's been a lot happening behind the scenes. Medical expenses, financial struggles, he explained, watching as Emily's expression transformed into a blend of confusion and alarm. "We thought it would be better not to burden you, but that's not how we should have approached this." "Not burden me?" She echoed with disbelief, her voice trembling slightly. "You think keeping me in the dark was better? I could have helped." Her reaction reinforced a painful realization for John. This wasn't about shielding Emily. It was about empowering her. They had operated under the misconception that independence meant isolation. In truth, sharing their burdens could forge a deeper bond, a choice he had previously underestimated. We're not asking you to take the weight of it all. We lost our way in thinking we could manage everything on our own," he continued, fighting the doubts threatening to crowd his declarations. "But we're here now, wanting to lay it all out. There are implications, but we need to face the truth. I want you to know. You have a voice in this, and you matter greatly in our decisions moving forward." Silence engulfed the room. John felt the intensity of Emily's gaze probing his sincerity. Would she grasp his resolve? "What do you mean, all of it?" she asked, her voice steadier now, demanding clarity, perhaps even a hint of accusation. John saw vulnerability shift to strength, igniting his own newfound courage. "As difficult as this is, we need you to understand what we've been trying to hide. Not just for the sake of honesty, but for the sake of healing," he said. "This isn't just about finances. It's about the emotional foundation of our family." "But I don't know what that even looks like," Emily replied, her frustration rising. "How can I support something I don't fully understand? Her defensiveness struck John as deeply relevant. He had yet to fully comprehend the emotional cost of their secrecy. They had failed to acknowledge her position in this familial narrative. "We'll figure it out together," he insisted. "It may not be a linear path, but that's where we'll find strength. Share your frustrations, ask your questions. This is your chance to explore the reality we've skirted." As he spoke, John felt something progressively shift within him. A latent realization that active participation from Emily might be the catalyst for their transformation. Dare he hope that Emily could be a unifying force? "All right then," she said, the spark of determination illuminating her features. "Let's start with the financial issues. What's really going on?" The challenge in her voice forged a renewed conviction in John. He was ready to unravel the fabric of their life shortcomings, stitch by painful stitch. Sharing their reality had bestowed him with a clarity that was both daunting and liberating. But as the words formed on his lips, uncertainty gnawed at him. This was the precipice of chaos, or clarity. How far would the truth pull them apart, or could it weave them tighter together? With one foot over the edge of vulnerability, John knew that they were poised to uncover more than just financial strife. The unknowing shadows of the past awaited them, and he was ready to expose every dark corner. Would his daughter's reality shatter what little foundation remained, or could they build anew? His heartbeat quickened as he prepared to divulge the exact figures, and with them, the deeply buried fears that had haunted them all. Was he prepared for the potential fallout of their revelations? With a steady exhale, he began. "Emily, here's the real story." As John steadied his breath, the numbers tumbled into the air like stones dropping into a still pond, each one creating a ripple that threatened to expand indefinitely. "Last year alone, your mother's treatment cost us over $20,000. The insurance barely covered half." He could see the gears in Emily's mind turning, the realization dawning not just on her, but on him as well. This conversation was layered with more than just financial statistics. A flicker of anger crossed her face. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? I could have done something, sought help, anything." "Because I thought I was protecting you," he replied, the familiar words spilling uncomfortably from his lips, worn from use, each syllable forming a fabric of misguided intentions. "We wanted you to focus on your life, your dreams, without the burden of adult issues." Emily turned her head slightly, a sign of wrestling through the emotional tension. "But I'm not a child anymore, Dad. I need to be part of this, part of our family's fight." Her resolve struck him with a force that made him realize what he'd taken for granted. He'd underestimated her strength, her yearning for inclusion. It was an awakening, a pivotal moment where he pondered if all his efforts to shield her were not about protection but rather fear. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of admitting failure. "Okay, let's break down everything," he said, steeling himself. "It's not just about the bills piled up at home. It's about the emotional toll it takes, the fear we've been living with. It's exhausting." "What do you mean?" Emily pressed, leaning in as if to physically pull answers from him. "It means—" He hesitated. "It means your mother feels like she's a burden. And The crack in his voice startled him. "I don't know how to assure her otherwise. I've tried to carry it alone, and it's threatening to crush me." The truth hung palpably in the air, and John felt the shrapnel of his own defenses crumbling. He'd hidden behind the idea of control, forgetting that vulnerability could create an opening for real connection. Emily's brow furrowed. "Dad, we can all be burdens in different ways, but what you're feeling isn't just on you. We're supposed to be a team. We need to communicate." Her words were sharp, yet precise. A call to arms that challenged his long-standing notions of family dynamics. A flicker of acceptance lit within him. Emily had awakened something in him, a yearning for collaboration over isolation. He had assumed the role of protector but was now forced to confront the realization that protecting at the cost of transparency was a heavy chain around their ties. "Fine," he uttered, feeling the walls of his fortress shift. "Let's be honest. How about we work on a budgeting plan together? We can find ways to manage the situation. There are grants and support groups. I've seen some online." "Exactly!" Emily nodded fervently, barriers between them dissolving. "Let's reach out. We can create a strategy." In that moment, the room transformed into a space laden with potential. John could see his daughter morphing before him into an advocate for their family, a role he had long thought only he could fill. The space that once felt like a boundary evolved into collaborative ground, one where they could lay their burdens together, rather than one person carrying it all. "What else has been bothering you?" she pressed, her resolve now laced with concern, igniting a further dialogue. His breaths came unevenly as he fought through memories, some shadows attempting to cling but slowly falling away. "It's more than finances. I fear failing your mom, losing her, and not being enough for you." "Dad." Emily stepped closer, her emotional weight carried on her tone. "You aren't alone in this." A wave of gratitude washed over John, mingled with vulnerability, prompting him to speak again. "What if we sort through everything? Financial, emotional, so we are prepared for whatever comes next." Emily squared her shoulders, determination blossoming. "Yes, let's combine our strengths. We can start building plans and outline things we need to win this, together." As they began mapping solutions, John sensed something irrevocably shifting. This simple act of engaging with each other transformed into a crucible for mutual growth. Customers and colleagues blurred into the back of his mind. The mission was clear. He was building a bridge of understanding with his daughter, one that could sustain them through the chaos ahead. But just as clarity dawned, a shadow lingered at the corners. He recalled the ever-growing medical bills that lay in wait, just as the voice deep within his thoughts whispered fearfully of the upcoming confrontation with their realities, a looming reckoning. Could he uphold this newly forged bond when inevitable contradictions tested their resolve? "Let's start tonight," he proposed. "We'll tackle the financials first. Your mother deserves to know we're united." "Perfect," she affirmed, but her gaze hinted at an approaching storm. Her next question hovered in the air, thick with unsaid things. "But once we unravel this, what happens next?" At that moment, John understood they were no longer on the precipice, but rather stepping into uncharted territory. Each revelation carried the risk of intrusion into their bonds, and he braced for the tension that lay ahead, knowing they were not yet done with uncovering the raw truth that could either fortify them or pull them apart at the seams. He just hoped he was ready for whatever secrets lay waiting in the depths of their hidden past. The moment approached when clarity would meet chaos. He steeled himself for it. What more would they discover together? John's heart thudded in his chest as he turned his focus back to Emily. They had made a pact, a promise to each other to face the turbulence ahead. Yet an undercurrent of anxiety coursed through him, whispering doubts about their vulnerability. The reality was harsh. Money could be sorted. But the emotional wreckage was far deeper, tangled in a web of silence and fear. Drawing a deep breath, he reached for a stack of papers that had loomed ominously on the kitchen table. "Let's start with this," he said, eyeing the collection of bills that seemed to mock him with every glance. Emily nodded, steeling herself next to him. For the next hour they sifted through the clutter, dissecting line items, making calls to numbers that felt almost foreign. It wasn't just the budget affecting them. He could hear the fatigue in Emily's voice as they navigated through insurance policies and payment plans. "Why are we just learning about this now?" she asked quietly, frustration now laced with pain. "Is this something you've been dealing with alone for so long?" The question hung in the air, and John's stomach knotted. He had tried to keep Emily sheltered from the burdens that felt insurmountable, but he now understood that doing so kept her from stepping into her reality, from seeking her own path to contribute. "I thought I was protecting you," he admitted, his voice cracking. "Protecting me from what? The truth? You know I can handle more than you give me credit for." Her words struck John like a bolt of clarity. Emily was right. He had been dismissing her strength, believing that shielding her would safeguard their cherished family dynamic. Instead, it had bred distance. And now, during a moment meant for collaboration, he felt a creeping regret. As they spent the evening tackling numbers, digging deeper became not just about finances, but about peeling back layers of emotion left unspoken. Each conversation became an exposed nerve, revealing shadows that demanded light. "I'm scared, Dad," Emily whispered as they paused to breathe. "What if this gets worse, and we can't cope? What if Mom needs more than we can give?" The vulnerability in her voice sent waves of despair through him, a stark reminder of the truth they both faced. "We'll adapt," he assured, though internally he questioned himself. "We can seek help, grants, support. There are more resources than we think." Yet the more they discussed, the more John recognized the widening gulf between his words and the reality of their situation. He caught himself flinching at the thought of reaching out, a powerful contradiction where instinct fought against the necessity of connection. "I don't want to burden anyone," Emily confessed, her eyes dropping to the faded rug beneath their feet as if it might hold the answers. "Sometimes asking for help is the strongest thing we can do." His words came out measured, meant to be reinforcing, but inside, he fought against the old habits that had kept him isolated. Uncertainty hung in the air, each shared emotion stitching them closer. Yet he felt the frayed edges of his confidence ripple. After hours of sifting through the financial chaos and confronting their fears, the weary silence was punctuated only by deep breaths of realization, like a hand slowly wrapping around a newfound strength. "Let's make a plan," John said, feeling the shift in the atmosphere. "This isn't just about surviving. It's about thriving. Finding ways to conquer this together." Emily's face brightened, glimmers of hope breaking through her earlier despair. "Absolutely. Let's allocate a family night for meetings. We can brainstorm ideas, hold each other accountable." He nodded, her enthusiasm refreshing, yet doubt still gnawed at him. They needed more than just strategy. They needed emotional fortitude. "Once we collect all our resources, do we confront Mom with this?" she asked tentatively. "Yes, but gently," John replied. "We need to reassure her that she's not a burden to us, that she has us, and that we're combining our strengths." In that moment, both realized that this wasn't merely a financial reckoning, but a defining crucible that would test the very fabric of their family. As the night dragged on, the shadows of their hidden truths began to lose their potency, replaced gradually by the light of shared determination. But just as they began to chart a course forward, John felt an all-too-familiar weight in his chest, an unwritten fear circling their resolution. The confrontation with his wife felt imminent, yet daunting. He could almost hear the echoes of her pain surfacing. Would she accept their united front? "Tomorrow we face them together," he whispered. "Whatever comes, we'll handle it." Emily met his gaze, unyielding. "But what about the secrets, Dad? The things we still don't know?" With a tight grip on the counter, he wrestled with his thoughts. Tomorrow would peel back more layers than they were perhaps ready for. He braced himself for the tumult of emotions yet to explode, as the pulse of uncertainty wrapped itself around him again. Would these revelations strengthen them or shatter everything they'd rebuilt in a single night? The morning light filtered softly through the kitchen window, casting long shadows that mirrored the tension lingering heavily in the air. John stood by the coffee maker, the familiar sounds of brewing providing a stark contrast to the chaos brewing in his mind. Today was the day. The moment he would confront the emotional upheaval that had silently woven itself into the fabric of their lives. Emily entered the kitchen, her reluctant morning demeanor a reflection of the weight they would bear together. There was no need for words. Both understood that their imminent conversation with her mother would be a touchstone, a potential pivot point away from vulnerability or further into despair. As Emily poured herself a cup of coffee, John stole a glance at her, wondering if she felt the same heady mix of resolve and fear coursing through him. "We can do this, Dad," she said, sensing the pause in his thoughts. "We've got each other." Her affirmation struck a chord deep within him, resonating with the commitment they made to face challenges together. Yet as he prepared mentally for the day ahead, doubt crept in, intertwining with his determination. Would their united front prove strong enough? Would her mother see the strength in their bond, or perceive it as an act of betrayal? Before the clock ticked toward their meeting, John decided they needed to solidify their approach. "Let's list down everything we plan to address with Mom," he suggested, opening a notebook and flipping to a fresh page. "It'll help us remember our main points and not get lost in emotions." Emily's brow furrowed as she thought. "Okay, but what about how we feel? Maybe sharing our feelings should come first." John nodded at the insight. "Absolutely, that's crucial. If we frame our concerns from a place of vulnerability, it might resonate better with her." He wrote down their plan. Speak from the heart. List concerns. Propose solutions. It was a structured approach, but he sensed the layered emotional reality it concealed. As they finalized their notes, John's mind turned back to his own childhood. He had battled painful truths alone, convinced vulnerability was a sign of weakness. How much better it could have been if he'd felt safe to share his own fears. This feeling nudged at him, stirring his resolve to be a different kind of father. Yet, as they donned their armor of courage for the upcoming conversation, uncertainty clouded John's mind. Would he break open the vault of hidden truths both he and Emily had guarded for so long? What if the act of revealing so much at once unraveled their carefully pieced-together family dynamic? "No secrets today," he murmured, more to himself than Emily. The decision firmed, becoming a quiet mantra in his mind. They would expose the truth that had lingered like specters, and in the light of honesty, perhaps healing could begin. The scheduled time drew near, and as John and Emily made their way to the living room, every step felt heavier. Anxiety itched along his spine, but he remained resolute. They needed a plan of action, yes, but more importantly, they needed to bolster each other against the storm. "Let's remember, vulnerability is strength," Emily affirmed as she reached for his hand, their fingers interlacing. He smiled, heartened by her words, though doubt nibbled at the edges of his resolve. Together they entered the living room, where her mother sat, the morning light casting an ethereal glow around her. Instinctively, John felt a flicker of fear. What if this conversation didn't go as they envisioned? What if wanting to be honest only brought to light more pain, more chaos? Before he could dwell further, Emily initiated the conversation with practiced grace. "Mom, we need to talk," she started, encapsulating both their resolve. As her mother's gaze flickered between them, curiosity piqued and tension rising, John sensed the moment had arrived. The session would either fortify their family bonds or threaten their very core. With his heart racing, he prepared to confront their deepest fears, standing on the precipice of both vulnerability and strength. But just as he opened his mouth to speak, his heart froze at the shattering words that slipped from Emily's lips. Words that threatened to unearth buried truths he hadn't anticipated. The emotional reckoning was looming, and he could only brace for the tidal wave that was sure to follow. What depths of revelation was she about to unveil? As Emily took a deep breath, her voice steady, she glanced between John and his wife, Karen, who shifted uneasily in her seat. This was not merely a conversation. This was a reckoning. "Mom, Dad, there's so much we need to discuss about everything we've been facing," Emily began, her eyes locked onto her mother's. "This isn't just about the medical debt or financial issues. It's about our family's health as a whole." John could feel his heart thudding in his chest, but Emily's calm resolve gave him strength. He could already see the tension in Karen's shoulders, the way she braced herself for whatever was to come. "There are things we've kept buried, things that need to be out in the open," Emily continued, her voice unwavering. "Dad and I have talked, and we realize it's time to stop hiding the truth under the pretense of protection. We need you to know we're in this together." Karen's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "What are you saying, Em?" Her brows knitted, signaling an unease that grew as the moment stretched. In that fragile space, John found his voice. "Karen, we've been managing the mountain of your medical bills and the strain they've placed on our family. But it's more than just numbers. You feel burdened, and it weighs on us, too. We thought we were shielding you from pain, but all we did was push you away." Silence hung thick in the air, punctuated only by the sound of Karen's sharp intake of breath. John could see her processing every word, the betrayal nestled in her heart. But he also sensed an opening, an opportunity to break cycles of silence that had haunted them for too long. "Do you want to know the truth?" John pressed on, the stakes higher than ever. "We need each other. Keeping our struggles hidden from one another only creates walls. We want you to be involved. It's time for us to tackle this as a family, not as isolated individuals." With those words, John felt a surge of empowerment coursing through him. He was no longer standing by, allowing fear to dictate their narrative. He was actively choosing to rewrite it. He looked at Emily, who nodded in encouragement, and knew they were both ready to face the fallout. "I'm sorry for not including you," he said, staring into Karen's eyes, willing her to hear him. "You had every right to know about our challenges. All of them. You are the heart of this family, and it pains me to think that my decisions made you feel like a burden." Karen's expression softened, confusion giving way to recognition. "I never wanted to be a burden, John. I just didn't know how to lighten what felt like a burden on you both. Together, we can find a way through this." Emily interjected, her voice now imbued with hope. "We can share the load. It doesn't have to be a solitary journey. Let's face this head-on and create a transparent understanding of our situation." The shadows of doubt lingered, but John felt a swell of gratitude for this clarion moment of vulnerability. Just then, Karen's eyes began to glisten with tears, a release he hadn't anticipated. "I wish I'd known you felt this way," she said softly, her voice cracking with emotion. "I thought keeping this from you would protect us all." "It's never too late to start being honest," John said, his heart racing yet steady. "Openness can foster trust and healing. We can find ways to cope as a family, and together explore options for both your health and our finances." The tension in the room began to dissolve, replaced by a new foundation of strength built on transparency. "What if we set up regular family discussions?" Emily suggested. "Check-ins to see how everyone's feeling, not just about the practicalities, but about the emotional weight of it all." "Exactly," John echoed, now fully engaged. "Let's not wait until issues become unmanageable. We owe it to ourselves to create a family culture of support, rather than silence." As the conversation unfolded, the air around them crackled with the promise of redemption. They began discussing practical ways to address their financial situation, exploring options for support and community resources that had previously felt out of reach. Each step forward felt like stepping onto terrain both unfamiliar and invigorating, the prospects blossoming into something beautiful. For the first time in years, John felt a wave of relief. As he engaged in open dialogue, something shifted within him. The fear that had long dictated his choices gave way to gratitude for Emily's strength and Karen's resilience. Amidst plans and ideas for rebuilding their familial ties, John realized he was far stronger than he had ever believed. He found newfound confidence, recognizing that vulnerability was not a weight to be feared, but a bridge toward deeper connections. By the end of their conversation, there was a sense of lightness in the room, buoyed by the shared burdens now acknowledged and addressed. They'd begun the arduous journey of healing, and John felt a profound sense of accomplishment. They were transforming the narrative of their family from one of isolation to connection and collaboration. As they wrapped their discussion, Karen spoke up, her voice steady. "Thank you for being brave enough to bring this up. I promise to let you in more and to share when I'm struggling. You don't have to do this alone. None of us do," Emily added, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. For John, this was more than dialogue. It was a commitment. Standing there, he embraced a new role, one built on trust and unconditional support. He had faced fears but emerged transformed into a protector of truth, an advocate for openness, a father fully engaged in his family's journey. This encounter had crystallized the realization. The healing they sought was just beginning. The true victory was not merely about confronting past burdens. It was about weaving a new narrative where honesty ruled and love transcended struggles. As they shared a collective breath, John felt a profound sense of achievement. He had not only confronted his demons, but had reshaped a legacy of vulnerability, connection, and strength. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead, knowing they had each other's backs every step of the way. Now standing on solid ground, John reflected on the emotional growth he had undergone and the newfound intimacy within his family as they prepared to navigate their future. Unified, empowered, and ready to face anything. Don't wait one more second to support these incredible stories of personal transformation. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional journeys. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread these powerful narratives. Comment below to share your reactions and theories about this transformative conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this meaningful resolution. You need to show your support for the channel with these actions.